The Olympus scandal was precipitated on October 14, 2011 when British-born Michael Woodford was suddenly ousted as chief executive of international optical equipment manufacturer, Olympus Corporation. He had been company president for 6 months, and 2 weeks prior had been promoted to chief executive officer, when he exposed one of the biggest and longest-running loss-hiding arrangements in Japanese corporate history, according to the Wall Street Journal. Tsuyoshi Kikukawa, the board chairman, who had appointed Woodford to these positions, again assumed the title of CEO and president. The incident raised concern about the endurance of Tobashi schemes, and the strength of corporate governance in Japan. The facts concerning the apparently irregular payments for acquisitions exposed in an article in the Japanese financial magazine FACTA had come to Woodford's attention and which resulted in very significant asset impairment charges in the company's accounts. Japanese press speculated on a connection to Yakuza. Olympus defended itself against allegations of impropriety. Despite Olympus denials, the matter quickly snowballed into a corporate corruption scandal over concealment of more than 117.7 billion yen of investment losses and other dubious fees and other payments dating back to the late 1980s and suspicion of cover payments to criminal organizations. On October 26, Kikukawa was replaced by Shuichi Takayama as chairman, president, and CEO. On November 8, 2011, the company admitted that the company's accounting practice was inappropriate, and that money had been used to cover losses on investments dating to the 1990s. The company blamed the inappropriate accounting on former President Tsuyoshi Kikukawa, auditor Hideo Yamada and executive vice president Hisashi Mori. By 2012 the scandal had developed into one of the biggest and longest-lived loss-concealing financial scandals in the history of corporate Japan. It had wiped €80% off the company's stock market valuation, led to the resignation of much of the board, investigations across Japan, the UK and US, the arrest of 11 past or present Japanese directors, senior managers, auditors and bankers of Olympus for alleged criminal activities or cover-up, and raised considerable turmoil and concern over Japan's prevailing corporate governance and transparency in the Japanese financial markets. Woodford received a reported £10 million in damages from Olympus for defamation and wrongful dismissal in 2012. Around the same time, Olympus also announced it would shed 2,700 jobs and around 40% of its 30 manufacturing plants by 2015 to reduce its cost base. Background: Olympus Corporation, a major Japanese manufacturer of optical equipment listed on the Tokyo Stock Exchange had, according to its accounts for the year ended March 31, 2011, consolidated net sales of €847.1 billion in the year, and total shareholders' equity of €262.5 billion. The group employs close to 40,000 people around the world. Its assets of €1 trillion as at March 31, 2011 included €175.5 billion of goodwill, an intangible asset. Under the leadership of Tsuyoshi Kikukawa, who became president in 2001, the company's revenues increased from €467 billion to €847 billion while the profits were a relatively constant €35 billion. During the 1980s, many Japanese corporations relied on investments to bolster dwindling profits, particularly in its exports which had been eroded by a strong yen. Toshiro Shimayama, Olympus president from 1984 to 1993, admitted to the Nikkei Industrial Daily newspaper in 1986, "When the main business is struggling, we need to earn through Zaitech." Olympus invested in financial derivatives and other risky investments to boost profits. However, Shimayama said he does not remember any attempt to conceal losses during his tenure as president. "As president it wasn't the case where all financial reports would come to me, so I have no memory. During that time Masatoshi Kishimoto was the treasurer. I wouldn't have heard financial details." Kishimoto, Olympus president from 1993 to 2001, in turn denied involvement in Tobashi, and instead suggested possible implication of Hideo Yamada, whom he said he supervised poorly. In 1991 Olympus had to take losses of €2.1 billion on the value of its investments after the investment bonanza ended. In June 1998, Olympus was subject of market rumors that it had suffered sizable trading losses on derivatives which caused its shares to plunge by 11%. The rumors were emphatically denied by Olympus, which subsequently announced record profits. In September 2011, Olympus announced that it had written off part of a 45 billion yen investment in emerging market bonds. The company further disclosed during its interim results in October 1999, that it had lost nearly a 17 billion yen from interest rate and currency swaps. The company also reported that it had lost a 2.9 billion yen in the Princeton Economics International Ponzi scheme. According to Bloomberg, the annual report of Olympus Corporation for the year ended March 31, 2010 showed a 15.5 billion yen prior period adjustment for loss related to the purchase of preference shares from an unnamed third party. Goodwill on its balance sheet also increased by a 13.5 billion yen to account for the purchase. Businessweek noted that ratio of a company's debt relative to its equity ranks Olympus among the top 2% most highly geared of Japan's largest companies, while the Financial Times commented that its capital base and equity ratio in 2011 of below 14% is the weakest among its peer group. Olympus is the only Nikkei 225 constituent whose intangible assets principally goodwill of around a 168 billion yen exceeds net assets. External growth having spent some $4 billion during this period under the stewardship of Kaikuwa, the company's aggressive strategy of external growth was not without criticism. According to an Olympus employee, the acquisitions process and funds movements were under the tight control of a small circle of executives in the financial affairs group. Japanese Business Daily is quoted as saying more than 100 businesses were acquired during Kaikuwa's tenure, and that the majority were unlisted and loss-making. The investments were in diverse sectors such as pet care and DVD production, and often had little connection with the core Olympus business. The most significant acquisition was the British medical equipment maker Gyrus Group, acquired in 2008 at a cost of $2 billion, the equivalent of almost 5 times turnover and 27 times EBITDA. In the same year, Olympus also paid out a 73.5 billion yen when it acquired 3 small venture firms Altis, Humalabo, and News Chef. By contrast, in 2009 Olympus sold the profitable diagnostics unit it had built up over 40 years to Beckman Coulter for $1 billion, approximately 2 times turnover to free up capital. Exposure of the scandal Woodford's background and inquiries British-born Michael Woodford was an Olympus veteran of 30 years, and previously executive managing director of Olympus Medical Systems Europa. As European director in 2008, Woodford had noticed the strange goings-on at the company such as the Gyrus acquisition, which should have been within his scope but was instead handled from Tokyo. However, on July 30, 2011, the matter surfaced again, when Woodford's attention as president was drawn by German colleagues to an article in FACTA that alleged Olympus had made undisclosed payments for a series of acquisitions, some of which were outside its core camera and endoscope business. Most notably a sum of $687 million apparently paid to advisors as part of the Gyrus acquisition. Woodford said that he asked Hisashi Mori in some confidence about the FACTA report, and stated also that at a lunch meeting in August with Kaikuwa and Hisashi Mori, Olympus compliance officer, Kaikuwa revealed he ordered staff not to tell Woodford about the allegations because Woodford was too busy dealing with other matters. Kaikuwa dismissed the article as tabloid, sensationalist journalism. Upon learning about a second article referring to payments by Olympus to anti-social forces, a euphemism for Yakuza, the Japan Times notes that from the start, FACTA remained the lone Japanese journal to scoop the Olympus accounting irregularities until the scandal broke in Western media sources after Woodford exposed the matter. Woodford began to write a series of 6 letters to Mori and Kaikuwa regarding his concerns as to governance issues relating to the company's M&A activities. Woodford copied later letters to the company's auditors, and threatened to resign if he did not receive satisfactory responses about the 2008 Gyrus acquisition costs, and the goodwill impairment of around $600 million made that year for the other acquisitions. On April 1, 2011, Woodford was promoted to the post of President and Chief Operating Officer, replacing Tsuyoshi Kikukawa and becoming the first ever non-Japanese chairman of Olympus. Woodford's appointment as CEO. 6 months after Woodford's appointment as COO and President, on October 1, Olympus elevated him to its Chief Executive Officer, stating that since his appointment as President-COO, the board have been extremely pleased with the progress made under Mr. Woodford's leadership in this role, which has exceeded the expectations at the time of his appointment. At the time of Woodford's appointment, he was regarded as an unlikely choice. Reuters reports there were rumors that he only got the job because he would be easy to control. Some Japanese observers saw Woodford, who speaks no Japanese, as the chairman Kikukawa's new pet. An article in FACTA underlined the skeptics' views, saying the fact that the company picked a bottom-ranking foreign executive director with virtually no significant responsibilities from amongst a total pool of 25 potential candidates, including the vice president who was responsible for medical instruments. Set tongues are wagging. Woodford's promotion was announced through a press statement without calling a news conference. The press release, which was full of praise for Woodford, mentioned his success in cutting costs and presented him as the new global face of Olympus. According to Woodford, Kikukawa had reminded him privately upon appointing him president, "I am the one who has the authority to hire and fire, and to decide remuneration for board members in the next tier down of management," thus signaling Woodford was little more than his puppet. The New York Times similarly suggested that the promotion may have been intended to instill Woodford with a greater sense of loyalty to the board, and Woodford suggested it was done to reduce his motivation to resign. Nikkei Business noted that the announcement was made only in its English webpage, and after talking to Olympus, it commented, Woodford's title had changed from COO to CEO, but it did not signify any real change in the company's leadership. Woodford himself was soon to realize that his appointment to CEO was a name only. Woodford's removal as CEO. If the intention of the promotion was to deter Woodford's questions, it did not have the intended effect. Following his appointment, Woodford persisted in pressing the issue of the questionable transactions, and, based on his belief that an internal probe would not get all the necessary answers, he also engaged accounting firm PricewaterhouseCoopers to give substance to his suspicions. Woodford copied his final 2 letters to senior members of the Ernst & Young organization in Japan, Europe and the United States, as well as their global chairman and CEO. PwC's report highlighted that as part of the deals, a success fee an intermediary's fee for closing an acquisition deal of $687 million for the Gyrus acquisition was paid to 2 small firms, US-based Axis America LLC and Cayman Islands-based Axam Investments Limited. PwC also examined the transactions resulting in the $600 million write-down. Kikukawa convened an emergency board meeting on October 14, and then, arriving late, cancelled the circulated agenda and asked the board to consider removing Woodford from his post of chief executive. Woodford was not allowed to speak or vote. The motion was carried unanimously, although he retained his seat on the board of directors. Kikukawa circulated a staff email the same day, stating that the departure was due to differences in management style, and that Woodford had ignored established decision-making processes and created many wedges among the managers and within the organization. Vastly different to what we had expected of him, which was to accelerate decision-making and speed up the management. After Woodford's removal, Kikukawa was reappointed president and CEO of Olympus. 1 week later, he accused Woodford of having created a gang of direct reports that circumvented Mori, his supposed immediate subordinate. Kikukawa resigned on October 26 to restore confidence in the company under the new management. At the press conference, he declared Olympus to be clean, continued to accuse Woodford of attempting to seize power, and maintained Woodford was autocratic, and that his alleged offenses included intimidation of my own staff. By contrast, Woodford alleged that his forced departure was linked to several prior acquisitions and payments he questioned, particularly the $2.2 billion deal in 2008 to acquire British medical equipment maker Gyrus Group, and said on Bloomberg Television, "The board has to go, they're all toxic, they are all contaminated. On November 30, Woodford announced that he would resign from the Olympus board, saying that his decision was unrelated to the official investigations in Japan, the UK and the USA. He added that his resignation was necessary in the context, and that he was committed to ensuring that Olympus has the best possible opportunity to succeed going forward, starting with a new and untainted board of directors. Company's initial announcements following Woodford's departure. During a conference call with investors on October 17, Olympus Executive Vice President Hisashi Mori said the company might sue Woodford for releasing internal information to news media. Olympus issued statements on October 19 defending the acquisitions of Altis, NewsChef and Humalabo, saying that they were determined to have great potential in the medical and healthcare industries. Press reported that although the three companies had minuscule capital funds, their combined business value was estimated at between €96.9 and €124.6 billion. Olympus denied that the acquisitions were unrelated to the core business. The description given of the companies on October 19, and how they fit into the group's strategy, were contradicted by the later statement. Initially, Altis was described as being engaged in environmental solutions business proposing resources recycling and CO2 reduction focused on petrochemical plants. In an October 27 disclosure, the unit was mainly engaged in recycling business for medical waste. Humalabo was described initially said to undertake research and development sale of skin-improving substances using a fungus known as Bowsida mycota, but in the later statement was said to be mainly engaged in development of health supplements with ingredients extracted from shiitake mushroom mycelium. While the basic description of NewsChef as a maker of cookware for microwave ovens was not changed, Olympus added that disease prevention and prognosis through foods was one of its objects. Olympus said on October 19 that the value of the stakes in the three companies had been impaired by €55.7 billion, more than three-quarters of the acquisition cost, blaming it on worsened external environment following the 2008 recession. However, it later admitted that the business prospect diverged from the assumption we had at the time of the investment. At a press conference in Tokyo on October 27, the president Takayama blamed Woodford for the decline in the company's share price, saying if this secret information had not been leaked, there would have been no change in our corporate value. Takayama said the amounts paid for Gyrus will pay off considering what value we will gain from the Gyrus acquisition in the future. He further justified the purchase of the three small Japanese companies as part of a strategy to find new growth areas to reduce our over-reliance on the endoscope business. However, Mori, who was the main speaker, and Takayama were criticized by impatient journalists for their responses that meandered without addressing the issues. Olympus internal investigation. Olympus delegated the task of selecting members to its third-party panel to investigate the allegations to two men who were appointed to the board in June. Yasuo Hayashida, physician who was visiting professor at Juntendo University, and Hiroshi Kuruma, a former executive at the Nikkei Business Daily. On November 1, Olympus announced the composition of its third-party panel, headed lawyer and former Supreme Court Justice, Tatsuo Kainaka. The panel would include 4 lawyers and 1 certified public accountant. In the week of November 6, Olympus announced that Hisashi Mori had been dismissed. Auditor Hideo Yamada had resigned. At a press conference, Takayama revealed he had known absolutely nothing about the scheme until Mori informed him earlier in the week. He said Kagawa, Mori and Yamada were not responsible for the initial investments, but had covered up the losses with the company's best interests at heart. At the news conference, Takayama bowed as he apologized for the highly inappropriate disposal of the losses. The Financial Times said Takayama had not addressed the size and origin of Olympus' past losses, the identity of the executives who approved the initial cover-up, the exact means by which it was executed, and the reason it took so long to dispose of the bad assets. Ahead of the much-awaited board meeting on November 25, to be attended by Woodford, 2 directors Kaikawa and Mori announced their resignation. Yamada, who enjoyed observer status on the board, also resigned. Separately, Current President Shuichi Takayama said the board members would resign once the path to Olympus revival became clear. However, Woodford said, if they have an iota of care for the company then they should resign in the near future. According to Olympus, 8 executives including Takayama were to take pay cuts of between 30 and 50% starting December, to take responsibility for the accounting scandal. Takayama's salary would be halved. In mid-January 2012, Olympus published its panel's report. It decided that 5 individuals were responsible: auditors Minarota and Katsuo Komatsu, outside auditors Makoto Shimada and Yasuo Nakamura, and standing auditor Tadao Mai. Ota was held responsible for 3.7 billion yen, having been the head of the accounting division at the time the losses were made in the 1990s. The others were held jointly responsible for around 4.7 billion yen for overlooking the illegal activities. The report cleared KPMG and Ernst & Young of any responsibility for the accounting fraud at the company and concluded that the scheme had been too well concealed. The report said, the masterminds of this case were hiding the illegal acts by artfully manipulating experts' opinions. Regulator and law enforcement action. Following his dismissal, Woodford quickly travelled back to London, where he passed on a file of information to the British Serious Fraud Office, and requested police protection. He hinted that the payments may have been linked to forces behind the Olympus board. Japanese newspaper Sankei went further, to suggest that the payments could be linked to the Yakuza. The Financial Times reported that relevant authorities in several jurisdictions were investigating the case. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, which had also been given files about the suspicious transactions by Woodford, opened its case in mid-October. Other federal law enforcement agencies, including federal prosecutors in Manhattan, had also taken an interest. The SEC was said to be examining Axis America. Experts speculated that U.S. investigators were assessing whether there were kickbacks to Olympus officials or whether money laundering or other illicit acts were involved. The British Serious Fraud Office and the FBI were said to be working with a Japanese financial services agency. Olympus disclosed that they were being investigated by the Tokyo Metropolitan Police, while unnamed sources said that a unit of the Tokyo Police dealing with organized crime may also be involved in the investigation. The Japanese Securities and Exchange Surveillance Commission and the Tokyo Stock Exchange are also reported to have taken an interest in the case. The New York Times published details of an official investigator's memorandum prepared for the SESC, the Tokyo Prosecutor's Office and the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department, which stated the true magnitude of losses was 481 billion yen. It said that of the questionable acquisition payments, investments and advisory fees made between 2000 to 2009, only 105 billion yen has been accounted for in some way. Investigators named Tsubasa.net, a software maker acquired by Olympus through ITX in 2005, as a front company with known affiliations with the Yamaguchi-gumi, the largest of Japan's Yakuza organizations. Altis, Humalabo and News Chef acquisitions advised by global company were also identified as front companies with links to organized crime. The headquarters of Olympus Corporation was visited by Japanese prosecutors on December 21, 2011 as part of its investigation. NHK-TV said the home of Tsuyoshi Kikukawa, former Olympus president, was also targeted by authorities looking into wrongdoing. Japanese authorities arrested 7 individuals in connection with the case on February 16, 2012. These were former Olympus president Kikukawa, the former executive vice president Hisashi Mori, former internal auditor Hideo Yamada. Also arrested were bankers Akayo Nakagawa, Nobumasa Yoku, and their associates Takuhara and Hiroshi Ono. Other external responses and actions. Auditors The accounts of Olympus were audited in the 1990s by the Japanese affiliate of then Big Five accounting firm Arthur Andersen until the latter collapsed in 2002, when KPMG ASA became its auditor. KPMG remained the auditor up until 2009, after which the Ernst & Young Shin Nihon took over. At no point were any major issues signaled by the company's auditors. The Financial Times reported that KPMG had raised some questions when the firm audited Olympus, but audit reports were always unqualified, and E&Y signed off on clean audit reports in 2010 and 2011. According to an email sent by former chairman Tsuyoshi Kikukawa that Michael Woodford made public, Olympus had replaced KPMG with E&Y after the former expressed disagreement with the accounting treatment of the Gyrus acquisition. The Fort queried why, this being the case, KPMG had signed off on the 2009 accounts. Tsutomu Okubo raised a question in the upper house of the Diet as to why the auditors apparently failed to stop the cover-up. The Japanese Institute of Certified Accountants said that it would look into the auditor's role. According to a letter filed with the UK Registrar of Companies, the auditors to Gyrus resigned partly because of its clients accounting for the securities. KPMG qualified Gyrus accounts because they could not ascertain that Axam was not a related party. The auditors also took issue with the accounting treatment of the preference shares. In its audit letter to Gyrus Group dated April 26, 2010, KPMG considered that there were circumstances connected with our ceasing to hold office that should be brought to the attention of the company's members or creditors. Ernst & Young, the firm that succeeded KPMG, also expressed reservations about the 2010 Gyrus accounts for uncertainty, due to the lack of information about Axam. Bloomberg noted that both Gyrus annual reports were filed late. Instead of filing within the 9-month statutory limit, the accounts were filed more than a year from the company's year-end. In late November 2011, Michael Andrew, KPMG International Global Chairman, said his firm had complied with its legal obligations to pass on information related to Olympus's 2008 acquisition of Gyrus, and were removed as auditors for so doing. Andrew said, "It's pretty evident to me there was very significant fraud and that a number of parties had been complicit." However, while the Japanese firm forced a 71 billion yen restatement of dubious valuation of certain acquired assets, the firm signed off on the financial statements in the same year that contained questionable figures. Other members of its global network in UK and elsewhere had apparently expressed grave reservations over. Although the Olympus inquiry had questioned the auditors signing off on the accounting treatment of preferred shares, and whether the handover from KPMG to Ernst & Young in 2009 was thorough, E&Y's own review in turn questioned the thoroughness and accuracy of the Olympus inquiry's findings. The E&Y concluded there were no problems with the handover in terms of the guidelines, but were looking into what more could have been done. It further said that its powers of investigation were limited by their inability to question the outgoing audit firm. Stock market and stakeholder reactions. Olympus had a market capitalization of $673 billion on October 13, 2011, immediately before Woodford was sacked. By the end of the next day, the valuation had fallen to $422 billion. Analysts at Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank and Nomura Securities, concerned about corporate governance issues at the company as well as its balance sheet, all immediately downgraded their stock ratings. Goldman Sachs, who had only upgraded its rating in a report dated October 12, suspended its coverage after Woodford was removed from office. Nomura and JP Morgan announced on October 20 that their coverage of the company was halted. It was reported that Government of Singapore Investment Corporation, the Singapore Sovereign Wealth Fund which was one of the principal shareholders, immediately disposed of its 2% stake on the first hint of scandal. Share price plunged several days running upon market fears that the shares would be delisted as the company could not meet its reporting mandatory deadline for its quarterly results. In the week to November 18, Nippon Life announced that its stake had been reduced by one-third, from 8.18% to 5.11%, because of the uncertainty. Mitsubishi reduced its stake from 10% to 7.6%. Some major foreign institutional investors have pushed to bring back ousted Chief Executive Michael Woodford, UK fund manager Baillie Gifford, Harris Associates, and Southeastern Asset Management, owning respectively 4%, 5% and 5% stake, all believed he was the best candidate to lead the cleanup. Other investors have demanded more disclosures from the company about the state of its affairs. Domestic investors, including Nippon Life Insurance, demanded prompt action. On November 2, a shareholder from Nara Prefecture was reported to have asked the company's auditor to bring a case against former executives of Olympus to court to reimburse a 140 billion yen to the company, failing which he will sue them through another rights group, Lawyers for Shareholders' Rights. Two American law firms announced that they were initiating investigations Olympus Corporation and some of its directors and were seeking investors who purchased Olympus ADRs between November 7, 2006 and November 7, 2011 on the grounds that the company's share price had been inflated through false accounting and that directors had hidden substantial losses by false statements and material omissions. The quotation price of Olympus shares on the Tokyo Stock Exchange on November 15 had fallen by some 75% since the scandal erupted. The price continued to be volatile, trading was halted as its price hit the upper limit for price falls. On 14 and 15 November, after the threat of delisting ebbed, trading in its shares was once again halted when buy orders heavily outnumbered sell orders. The price rose by the upper limit of 100 yen. Trading only took place after hours as there was a glut of unsatisfied buy orders. The share price rose in 4 straight trading sessions, reaching 834 yen at one point on November 16. Many longtime employees of Olympus Corporation were shocked and angry, and felt betrayed by the executives who were responsible for bringing public humiliation onto the company. Former director Koji Miyata started a website, called Olympus Grassroots, demanding cleanup at the company they say they love. Miyata also circulated a petition targeted at employees calling on the reinstatement of Woodford. As Olympus has a 70% market share in endoscopy, the scandal caused anxiety and concern among the medical profession, which sees Olympus endoscopes as irreplaceable. While foreign shareholders supported Woodford's proxy fight to replace the Olympus board, he failed to gain support from Japanese institutions. Sumitomo Mitsui Bank, identified as the company's main creditor, warned Woodford that he would fail. Woodford was disappointed by their silence, but acknowledged that even had he won a shareholder vote to become chief executive, the antipathy towards him of major shareholders and creditors, and the within the company about his decision to publicly disclose the accounting irregularities, would have made running the company difficult. On January 6, 2012, on failing to secure support from Japanese institutional shareholders, Woodford said that the 12-week public scandal had taken an enormous emotional toll on him and his family, and announced that he would abandon his proxy fight to take control of the Olympus board. Instead, his lawyers had initiated legal proceedings in London seeking unspecified damages for dismissal from his 4-year contract. Olympus convened an extraordinary shareholders meeting for April 20, 2012 to vote on its proposal for the new board and approve the restated accounts. The board slate consisted of 11 candidates, the majority of whom were completely independent of Olympus. The company controversially sought to promote its executive officer, Hiroyuki Sasa, to president. Its candidate for chairman was Yasuaki Kimoto, a former senior executive of Sumitomo Mitsui Banking Corporation. The largest creditor of Olympus. Another proposed director is Hideaki Fujizuka, formerly with the Bank of Tokyo Mitsubishi. While the company argued the candidates were well qualified, a shareholder advisory firm urged investors to vote down the proposed president citing his lack of experience as a corporate manager of a turnaround situation. It also expressed concern that the ex-bankers may put banks' interests ahead of shareholders. ISS also recommended shareholders not to approve the accounts on grounds that it could undermine any legal recourse they may want to pursue in future. Foreign shareholders opposed the nominations, citing undue influence of the creditor banks. Corporate governance concerns. Masaki Shizuka of the TSE expressed the concern that investor confidence in information provided by the company may decline. Tsutomu Okubo, who is to chair a new working team to discuss reforms to the Company Act to strengthen corporate governance, questioned whether the corporate auditor system was functioning properly, and whether the company's accountants were acting as a proper check on management. Toshio Oguchi, representative director of governance for owners in Tokyo, argued that the affair pointed to a dysfunctional board, even if they didn't know about the Tobashi The fact that the board approved the payment cannot have been a correct decision. The acquisition price tag was justified using sales forecast for the three companies Altis, Humalabo and News Chef of €88.5 billion for the fiscal year ending March 2013 which CFO Asia said was practically impossible to achieve. It further noted that the combined sales targets for the three companies for the fiscal year to March 2012 were subsequently reduced by 93% to a combined €6.5 billion. Despite the suspicions of wrongdoing, Olympus strongly denied suggestions that the transactions were something illegal or unauthorized. CFO Asia said that if there was truly no corporate malfeasance, there are uncomfortable questions about the competence of the internal and external teams that evaluated the three acquisitions, as well as the capabilities of the senior managers and board members that accepted the sky-high valuations and approved the deals. Nikkei Business said similarly that the size of the losses could very well call management responsibility into question. In a commentary in the Financial Times entitled "Olympus's Deceit Was Dishonorable," John Gapper noted that it is still possible to believe that the accused trio of directors thought they were behaving honorably in hiding failure discreetly and not to make their predecessors lose face. He noted that accounting scandals were not uniquely Japanese, but that it was a nice piece of corporate satire to conceal losses by exploiting the widespread habit of paying too much for acquisitions and writing them down. The advisory fee was especially creative. Gapper criticized the weakness in governance, particularly how 12 out of 15 directors were either executives or former executives of the company, and that Hideo Yamada, head of the audit board, was complicit in the scam. He also noted that auditors KPMG and Ernst & Young would have to answer tough questions about why the manipulation was never discovered or properly questioned. Bloomberg View columnist William Pesek said, "Japan's corporate culture of denial, of ignoring problems and letting them fester, keeps running up against a globalized world that values agility, innovation and transparency. Olympus demonstrates all too painfully how much old Japan tolerates a lack of accountability among senior executives. Inadequate disclosure. A disinclination to challenge authority and absolute deference to corporate boards regardless of share performance." While he also observed that the independence of the directors was inadequate, he said Japanese executives were much more moderately paid compared to American ones. Shareholders assume directors are smart, devoted people working for the good of Japan Incorporated. Tough questions are rarely asked. Errolo of the Star said a company apology for a fall in the share price trivializes the possible wrongdoings and misplaces emphasis on an effect rather than the cause. Takayama's remark on the inconvenience of a fall in share price reflects a common flaw in the mindset of the people who run listed companies. Somehow, they lose sight of the fact that they manage businesses, not share prices. During a press conference in early November, Financial Services Minister Shizaburo Shimi said the market should not call into question the standards of corporate governance of other listed companies just because of Olympus. However, some journals linked the case of Deo Paper Corporation, also subject of a scandal involving diversion of funds by its chairman. Other commentary. Floyd Norris of the New York Times said the cause of the losses were rooted in the Plaza Accord that caused value of the dollar to slide from 250 yen in 1984, to 121 yen by the end of 1987, heavily penalizing Japanese exports. It turns out that it was an effort to make the company's balance sheet accurate. It now appears the chairman reacted with righteous indignation. He had not stolen. He had only tried to clean up a mess without damaging the reputation of generations of Olympus executives. Floyd says that the third-party investigation report commissioned by Olympus infers there had been no need to tell Mr. Woodford about what had happened because the fraud was finally behind the company when Mr. Woodford took the job. Financial Times questioned why the Japanese auditor firm signed off on the financial statements in the same year when other members of its global network apparently refused to give clean bills of financial health to Olympus subsidiaries such as Gyrus in the UK, and elsewhere. One analyst suggests the poor performance of Japanese auditors may be due to low pay, and overwork due to the shortage of certified public accountants. Audit fees are up to 1/5 of that of comparable U.S. companies. there are 17,000 CPAs in Japan, compared with 330,000 in the US. The Economist said that the Olympus scandal is not an accounting misdeed it is a mindset. Olympus, and the response of Japanese officialdom, is less about a single sad incident as it is a view about the malleability of rules, and the subjectivity of their enforcement. Until Japan's institutions of governance those internal to the corporations, as well external regulators and prosecutors change, Japan cannot change. Aftermath Woodford after scandal during 2011 and 2012, Woodford was recognized as Business Person of the Year for bravery and whistleblowing by the Sunday Times, The Independent and The Sun, and Person of the Year at the Financial Times ArcelorMittal Boldness in Business Awards in March 2012. He consults on corporate governance worldwide, speaks on human rights, whistleblower laws, and road safety, and states he had given several millions of pounds to charities. Woodford, who stated he had received death threats over his exposing of the cover-up, was reported to have been awarded £10 million in damages from Olympus for defamation and wrongful dismissal in 2012. A book and film were also undertaken. Woodford stated his concerns that, far from learning from the scandal, Japan's response was to become even more secretive and unsupportive of change in areas highlighted by the scandal. Olympus and wider aftermath after the scandal. In 2012, Olympus also announced it would shed 2,700 jobs and around 40% of its 30 manufacturing plants by 2015 to reduce its cost base. In July 2013, Kai Kagawa and Mori were both sentenced to 3 years in prison, 5 years suspended. The auditor who had been party to the fraud was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison, 4 years suspended. Olympus was fined 700 million yen. In April 2014, 6 banks filed a civil suit against Olympus over the fraud, seeking an additional 28 billion yen in damages. The corporate culture exposed by the scandal is seen as the inspiration for the record-breaking drama Hanzo Naoki. Details of the suspect transactions. In the early 1990s, Yamaki Securities was Olympus' main broker, but went bankrupt after accumulating 260 billion yen in Tobashi investment losses. In 1998, Nomura succeeded as Olympus' main broker. Prompted by the Yamaki collapse, new mark-to-market accounting rules were made mandatory in 1999, from which time companies were obliged to disclose losses on their securities investments in a timely manner. Thomson Reuters reported that a fee of $687 million, equal to 31% of the Gyrus acquisition price, was paid to a middleman, whereas this is usually €2%. As part of his proof, Woodford released the report from PwC which showed that the sum of $670 million of the advisory payments was paid over to AXAM Investments Limited, a Cayman Islands company. In June 2010, 3 months after receiving its final fees from Olympus, it was struck off by local company registry for non-payment of license fees. Olympus revealed that the Axis fee included fees paid to Perella Weinberg Partners UK, who acted as financial advisor, and US law firm Weil, Gotshal and Mangers, who acted as legal advisors. The Telegraph said it has seen documents indicating a Mr. Sagawa was a director of Axam Investments and Axis America that received a $687 million advisory fee for the Gyrus acquisition. The Financial Times said its principals were former Nomura employees. The link to the scam caused Nomura shares to fall, though the bank denied involvement, claiming it was based on speculation and not on fact. Akio Nakagawa and Haim Sagawa, both of whom started their careers at Nomura Securities and were also colleagues at Drexel Burnham Lambert and Payne Webber, were behind Axis, according to Reuters. Nakagawa, who was once head of equities at Payne Webber in Japan in the early 1990s, had long-standing relationship with Olympus. A former Payne Webber banker attested that Nakagawa and Sagawa were handlers for Olympus, and they made use of Bermuda-based funds valued at hundreds of millions of dollars to manage its balance sheet using Japanese accounting loopholes. Axis America, having negotiated the success fee for Gyrus in a combination of cash and stock, then transferred the stock component to AXAM Investments, an affiliate registered in the Cayman Islands. In 2010, the stock was sold back to Olympus for $620 million. Nobuya Sayoku, former banker who had dealt with Olympus when he worked for Nomura, is also cited as being behind certain other of the transactions under the spotlight. Having founded Global Company in the late 1990s, he persuaded Olympus to invest a 30 billion yen in their venture capital fund in 2000. In 2003, Olympus made a piecemeal acquisition of an information technology group, ITX. Akinobu Yoko's older brother, was chief financial officer for ITX. The elder Yoku became a group executive officer after Olympus became majority owners. Nobuya Sayoku also introduced 3 small, unprofitable companies in which he was shareholder and executive that Olympus acquired for a 73.4 billion yen a year. News Chef, a maker of microwave cookware, Altis and Humalabo. According to the Wall Street Journal, Olympus acquired the companies from Cayman Island-based funds between 2007 and 2010. Nikkei Business reported informed sources deriding these as shell companies. Part of the transaction took place on April 25, 2008, when Olympus paid the equivalent of $7 million to funds named Dynamic Dragons 2 and Global Targets. 17 Cayman and BVI special-purpose vehicles were used to make payments. Funds flowed through Commerzbank AG, Societe Generale SA and LGT Bank. The WSJ noted that there were a large number of frequent and complex corporate changes but determined from the paper trail that Dynamic Dragons 2 was part of a network of elusive Japanese firms and financiers that often invested together, and whose ties and identities were constantly shifting. Kenji Takasago, associate professor at Kobe University, suggested the complexity of the scheme was to obscure the money trail. Jake Adelstein, former crime reporter for the Yomiuri Shimbun, said these 3 acquired companies shared addresses and office space with several other companies with different names but sometimes the same employees, creating a web of real and paper companies that make tracking the money very difficult. He also alleged that Japanese authorities considered one of the auditors involved a corporate blood brother to the Yamaguchi-gumi. Sankei Shimbun said there were perhaps 10 brokers involved in the acquisition schemes, and that while they are not members of crime syndicates themselves, some conduct economic activities together with antisocial forces. There is the possibility that Olympus has supplied cash as a result. However, the investigatory panel set up by Olympus rejected reports the allegations that the acquisition funds could found their way to organized crime. Panel chairman Tatsuo Kainaka said our committee has confirmed no such facts in its investigations so far. Structure of Gyrus Commission In mid-June 2006 Olympus paid U.S.-registered Axis America the sum of $3 million in basic fees, and agreed to pay a completion fee of 1% of the acquisition price in addition to the basic fee for advisory work relating to acquisitions. 1 year later, the agreed rate of completion fee to Axis was increased to 5%, payable in a mixture of cash, share options and warrants. It disbursed a further $2 million. When the Gyrus acquisition was announced, Olympus paid over $12 million, being the cash portion of the agreed completion fee. In September 2008, to top up the cash part of the advisor's success fee, Gyrus issued a 176.98 million yen of preferred stock to the AXAM against the advice of company auditors, according to Nikkei Business Daily. Olympus paid over a further $50 million, nominally as cash settlement for warrants. Regulatory disclosures in the UK show that the preferred stock was allotted on September 30 by Tsuyoshi Kikukawa, Hisashi Mori and Akira Nambu. The identity of the beneficiary Axam Investments was only made publicly known more than 18 months later. 3 days after the preferred stock was allotted and without the benefit of professional advice, a supplemental agreement was signed by Olympus officers that gave AXAM power of veto over any important decision in the Gyrus business. A buyback of preferred shares for $530 €590 million was authorized by the Olympus board. Axam subsequently negotiated a further increase in the value of the shares, for which Olympus finally paid $620 million in March 2010. According to a UK corporate filing for Gyrus, the value of the securities at the time was disclosed as $177 million. Bloomberg notes that executives Olympus had delayed accounting for the true cost of the success fees of Gyrus until March 2011, by which time Axam investments had been struck off by the Cayman Islands registrar for 9 months. Timeline: before 2011. 1981 Woodford joins Olympus as a surgical salesman, later becoming managing director of a British medical subsidiary. Late 1980s and 1990s Olympus makes substantial losses in financial trading, believed to be an attempt to mitigate poor trading results, due in part to Japan's weak currency. It conceals the losses using an unlawful but widespread practice known as a tobashi scheme, or tobashi. Around 2008 Olympus buys 3 companies paying far more than they are worth, the balance being unaccounted fees to a middleman of around 30%, controlling the matter directly from Japan although the companies are in Europe, Woodford's region. The deals offer over $2 billion. 2008 Woodford, by now responsible for considerable business across Europe, attempts to tender his resignation over the strange European acquisitions that should have been within his oversight but were instead directly controlled by Tokyo officials. He is given plausible reassurances and also promoted to run Olympus' entire European business. He accepts. 2011. April 1 Woodford appointed Olympus President and Chief Operating Officer. July 10 allegations of corporate irregularities surface in FACTA, a Japanese magazine. 3 weeks September 23 to October 11 After hearing of the allegations by email from German colleagues, and unable to find satisfactory answers internally, Woodford writes several times to the board as CEO seeking answers, but is rebuffed or unsatisfied. Around end September Woodford asks Chief Executive Tsuyoshi Kikukawa about the claims. Kikukawa cedes his role as CEO. October 1 Woodford appointed Olympus Chief Executive Officer following a board vote the previous day. The company press release stated that since April 2011's appointment as President-COO, the board have been extremely pleased with the progress made under Mr. Woodford's leadership in this role, which has exceeded the expectations at the time of his appointment. Kikukawa remains as chairman. Around early October still lacking satisfactory responses, Woodford appoints outside audit practice PwC to investigate. October 14 Woodford dismissed at a short board meeting. He leaves, and discloses his concerns publicly. November 8 Olympus makes admissions related to the scandal. November 24 Kikukawa and Mori resign from board. Remainder state they will also resign in 2012. 1 to December 14 Woodford unsuccessfully attempts to regain previous CEO role, but lacks sufficient support. December 20 Olympus reportedly makes plans to reduce Woodford's allies' ability to intervene by means of stock arrangements that would dilute their voting power. December 21 Olympus raided by law enforcement. 2012. February 16 7 arrests in Tokyo, ex-president Tsuyoshi Kikukawa, former executive vice president Hisashi Mori, former auditor Hideo Yamada, former bankers Akio Nakagawa and Nobuya Sayoku, and 2 others. May 29 Woodford and Olympus settle Woodford's claim for damages for a reported £10 million. See also, list of people involved in the Olympus scandal, Plaza Accord. Japanese asset price bubble of the late 1980s, lost decade. References. Further reading, Woodford, Michael. Exposure, How I Went from CEO to Whistleblower. Portfolio Penguin. ISBN 0670922226. External links, ex-CEO of Olympus on company's toxic board. Street Smart. Bloomberg. October 25, 2011. Archived from the original on November 23, 2011, Cooper, Chris. Olympus says Gyrus acquisition fees hid past losses, timeline. Bloomberg Businessweek. Archived from the original on November 11, 2011. Bacani, Caesar. Olympus scandal, The Endgame Begins. PG 1.23 CFO Innovation Asia. Archived from the original on November 11, 2011. Letter 6. serious governance concerns relating to the company's M&A activities. Letter from Michael Woodford to Tsuyoshi Kaikawa of October 11, 2011, Gyrus Group Limited, Bloomberg Business Week. Archived from the original on November 29, 2011, Olympus Corporation. Graphic of Olympus share price. Data Explorers. Archived December 6, 2011, third-party investigation report published December 6, 2011. Archived from the original on December 13, 2011, Hayao Yamamoto, Director of Samurai and Idiots, The Olympus Affair, Storyville, 2014-2015, BBC4, Samurai and Idiots, The Olympus Affair at the Internet Movie Database, Samurai and Idiots, The Olympus Affair, Point du Jour International, I Blew the Whistle on a £1 billion cover-up, Thorpe Bay businessman Michael Woodford speaks out on TV Tonight, Limited, Loudwater Mill, Station Road, High Wycombe, Buckinghamshire. HP 109TY,